got it. All right. So I thought I would just kind of talk a bit about myself and my art and whatnot. And then instead of like a demo where I'm going to be painting, I have like a big commission piece I'm working on. And I wanted to show some of the materials and processes that I use instead of just focusing on like one aspect. So hopefully that'll actually give more information and insight. But yeah, so a little bit about me. I grew up in Virginia, and I've done art since I was a kid, all throughout high school. I'll show some of my old art just to show kind of like the progression, because I think it's interesting to sort of look at your past self and kind of pull some of those things in sometimes. It's really interesting to see where these threads connect. But yeah, I kind of always knew I was going to be an artist, like I was that kid who was like, I don't need math, I'm going to be an artist. And even when I wasn't sure, I just always knew that it was just one of the only things I was good at. It wasn't even like oh, I know in my soul. It was just like, there's not a lot of other options. Like, this is just my thing. But yeah, so then I went to a small school in Delaware first and got my associate's degree. It was a really new school. It was called the Delaware College of Art and Design. And when I went there, it was like 10 years ago, over 10 years ago. It was really, really new, and it was okay, but I just kind of got my preliminary classes over with there. And then I transferred to the Savannah College of Art and Design in Georgia. And I really loved it there. And I graduated with my my degree in painting. And then I moved to Colorado because I had met my husband and he was in the Army. So we moved when he got restationed, and I started teaching there. I started teaching sip and paints at a coffee shop, and I was doing like anywhere from 1 to like 6 classes a week. So I just got like a lot of rapid fire experience doing a lot of teaching. I hadn't really planned to teach, but I just sort of fell into it and really fell in love with it. It was really interesting to like have people come to these sip and paints and be like, oh, I was dragged here by a friend. I haven't painted since I was in kindergarten. And then they would leave being like, oh my gosh, I want to do this again. And it would just like, that just made me feel so good. So I kind of got addicted to that feeling of like igniting people's creativity, and that's one of the things I love now is when someone's like, oh, I had such a terrible teacher in elementary school. They like killed my love for art. And now I love it again. I mean, that's just the best feeling.
Great statement.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, it's so great. The first couple times that happened to me during a sip and paint, when like you're like, oh, this people just come here and get wasted. But like when it started happening at sip and paints, I was like, oh my gosh, this is magical. So yeah, I really like I do really like it. Teaching can be really stressful for me because I do really care how the classes go. And like I get really anxious before I teach, but then I feel like the payoff is so great and fulfilling that I just keep doing it even when I am too stressed. So but I really love it. So yeah, so that was Colorado. And then I slowly I got kind of worn out of the sip and paints. I also personally I am sober. I got sober before I started teaching in Colorado. So I was teaching these sip and paints while sober. And I think after a while I just kind of got over it. And I found a couple avenues to teach teach watercolors and to teach kind of just other types of painting. And so I started branching in that direction whenever I could. And while I was in Colorado, I actually taught at a smoke and paint, which is very similar to a sip and paint, but a little slower, if you know what I mean. It was great. It was really, really nice.
That's hysterical. What is
Yeah.
your main medium that you like to work in personally?
I love watercolor and acrylic. I grew up doing watercolor as a kid. Like that was like the first thing that I did as a kid. So that's always felt very like intuitive to me. But acrylic is like a close favorite as well. So I oscillate between them, and I honestly use a lot of the same techniques for both.
Really?
Yeah. I'm going to show some progress pictures of some of the paintings I've done to show like the translucent layering I do, because I pretty much use acrylic paint as watercolor. I use it kind of like wash where like I water it down.
Do you put any medium in it to keep it from drying so fast?
I just use water.
Okay.
Yeah. I feel like I should branch into, like, I want to try mediums and kind of see how it goes, but I just haven't. And
Are
I
you painting on canvas or on paper?
would.
Oh, wood.
Yeah, with acrylic, I like wood.
Gessoed wood or no?
No, I figured out a process. Oh, I just packed. We're like in the middle of packing for this move, so some of my stuff is gone. But the first piece I did on wood, I did with acrylic, and I didn't seal the wood at all, and so I noticed that it all kind of it just soaked right in, and even when I painted really thickly, it still like lost the line. So I kind of came up with this way of using Mod Podge to treat the wood. And so I do a thin layer of Mod Podge and then I sand it to get it really nice and smooth. So then that layer of Mod Podge is so thin, but it seems to be just the right amount to let some of the paint in where I can use those watercolor techniques, but it doesn't just lose every line.
Is that a, I want to say archival, but I mean, I don't know what Mod Podge is made out of. I just
But yeah,
wonder.
it's not archival. And that's definitely something that I have been rethinking of, like, maybe that's the next step in the evolution of my process, is thinking more archivally. Because I definitely use Mod Podge for a lot and I know that it yellows in direct sunlight.
Oh,
Um, yeah, since it's on the bottom layer, the only time where I'm using it on top layers is when I'm doing my pieces where I add in pressed flowers. Because then I stick those with Mod Podge, and then I do a varnish over, like an archival varnish over the whole thing. Um, but yeah, I think I'm in the transition of going from using like cheaper materials to like nicer material. Like I'm kind of, I've always been like the paint on a budget person.
gotcha.
Yeah, but now like my work's getting nicer, my things are developing, so I think it's time to switch my material use.
You should tune in. I'll send you the link. We're having, or there's a woman in Santa Cruz who is the golden, uh, gives a golden demo. She's going to do a demo for our group, but she's in Santa Cruz. I'll send you her name.
Awesome, thank you. That would be great.
Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
Oh no, you're totally fine. The questions help because otherwise I'll just like derail probably. Okay, so that was, let's see, we were in Colorado. Yeah, and then my husband decided to get out of the army. It was very wearing on us and it really wore on my mental health a lot. So he decided to get out of the army and we decided to move here because he's a welder and there's a lot of work here. And so, but when we first moved here, I pretty quickly found out I was pregnant. So I didn't really work or paint for like about a year. And then I was able to work back into it. And I started teaching. I looked into some sip and paints around here, but it just nothing really clicked for me. So I started working at All Hands, which was a place that was open. It opened in 2018. They closed during the pandemic, unfortunately. They were only open for a couple of years, but I started teaching workshops there. And then Cabrillo
Is
found
that a
me.
co-op?
It was like she rented half of a storefront. Like she split it with another company, but she had like this area of a storefront and we would hold workshops.
Nice.
Yeah, it was really nice. The owner's name was Kendra, and it was a beautiful, like, I think it was a really wonderful dream. And then COVID hit and it just kind of wasn't sustainable. Yeah. But that was really nice. And then Cabrillo found me at the beginning of 2020 and asked me to teach with them. And I never actually got to teach in person before COVID hit. We went straight to virtual. So through them, I learned how to teach virtually, which was actually really cool and fulfilling and fun, which I was very skeptical about. But teaching with them has been really wonderful. So, and
Nice.
hopefully I'll get to do it once I move. They've already told me, like, since I can teach virtually, if I want to do it once I move to Virginia, then I can do that. So I'm hoping to continue teaching with Cabrillo.
Nice.
Yeah, but if anyone's interested, working with them has been really, really great. So
Might have to write to you about that.
yeah, and yeah, we'll talk about that because I think there's I can talk to the facilitator and see if there's possibilities.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
So your process, there to some of the things that you use. Let's go into that.
Yes, let's see. Let me pull up the pictures that I have. Okay, here. I'm going to share my desktop real quick. What did I just do? Okay. There we go. Let's see. You guys can see that, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I have some pictures here of kind of the beginning of a process. Let's see, which one was first? Probably this one. So with the wood pieces, and I'm sorry, this is sideways, but what I have been doing, each one is a little bit different. Like this one, I drew out the image first. Sometimes I do that, sometimes I don't. But for the background, what I've been doing is I water down the whole piece. So I spray the whole piece of wood and then I drop in the colors of the acrylic paint. This is all with acrylic paint, but that's clearly like a watercolor technique where I'm doing like a wet on wet.
Is
To get
this
all these
liquid
different,
acrylic?
yeah, like I just water it down. Again, I don't, I haven't branched into mediums and the water, I don't know if I'm just so used to it with watercolor. Like I'm really comfortable controlling the amount of water in my brush and my paint and everything. And mediums just move so differently. So I think I've just been sort of sticking with what I know and love.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I kind of just let that, I'll do that a few layers. Let's see. So I do a few different layers of that until I kind of build up the color because each layer is getting really soaked into the wood. And then I do the, once it's time to do the Mod Podge over top, then I do a layer of Mod Podge and then I sand it. And then after that, then the colors sit on top and it holds an edge better. So I get these funky like textures in the background from doing the wet on wet technique, and then I seal it. So then that background is sort of separated from the harder lines of the foreground.
So it's
So
pretty
that's kind of,
abstract in your background because
yeah,
it's not sealed.
yeah. And I really like to do that because then you can see the wood grain through.
Oh,
Um, yeah, one reason I love working on wood is that you can then see the wood. And I
are
think,
these panels art panels?
yes, yeah, I was getting them from Palace before they closed. And then I've also been carving into the wood. So this was the first piece I did where I painted and then carved. So this was the piece that I did before I figured out how to use Mod Podge. So you can see it kind of doesn't have as hard of lines. And the carving is like pretty rough. But then it all evolves to where I was able to get a lot crisper with things.
Wow.
Yeah, all these are carved up here. Like the back, this doesn't have a ton of carving, but these constellations are carved. And yeah, and this one I really figured out how to do like really nice thin layers of paint here. Like this is all you can see the wood grain through all of this. So it's like really thin washes and then really thick, like thicker, more opaque paint on the edges. So kind of playing with that difference.
Wow, this is definitely a watercolor looking lovely glazes that you're doing.
Thank you. Yeah, I think when I've played with any type of like mixing mediums or like I've done layers of varnish or anything with these pieces, then when I'm doing thin layers of paint, a lot of times the paint will come up, it gets pulled back up off of the wood. And I've noticed that too on the occasions when I've used too much Mod Podge. It's like I'm painting on plastic instead of wood, so it gets pulled right up. So I've kind of had to figure out how to do that kind of push and pull and get the right level of Mod Podge on there. And there's some collage I've been working in. I really like using mixed media.
I love it.
Thank you. And then pressed flowers. I started doing some pressed plants just for fun. And then I thought, oh, maybe I can mix them into my paintings and started playing with that. And that's been super fun. Commissions wise, I know like all of us are interested in like the business end of things. I'll just show images while I'm talking. So most of my commissions have come from people I know or like my mom's friends, you know, people who are somehow like in my orbit. I didn't get very many commissions from strangers until I started working in this more realistic style with the animals. Most of my first commissions were like pet portraits. I've been doing a million pet portraits forever. This one's on canvas, so that's not on wood. That's my mom's dog. So I've done a lot of pet portraits, a lot of house portraits. They started out as just sort of line drawings, and then my more recent ones disappeared, but they've gotten more complex.
Is this on wood too, or
These ones are on paper. The watercolor is on paper. But I started out really abstract. I did a lot of work like this. And then once I had my daughter, we moved to, and I did murals and like other just random little things. But I worked really abstractly. And then once we moved here and I had my daughter, we had so much less space that I had to work really, really small. And something about that sort of like kicked in my hyper focus, and everything got really detailed and realistic. Whereas before, everything I did was big and messy and abstract.
Interesting.
This piece is 6 feet long. Oh, that's not like rendering. I'm sorry, that's fuzzy, but it's 6 feet long. But this was like the most detailed kind of thing I would do. It would still be abstract in some way. And then once I had my daughter, my style changed completely, and I started doing this more realistic work.
But it's so cute.
And I've done some murals, which is really fun. This woman found these vintage wallpapers and didn't want to buy the wallpaper, so she spent thousands of dollars for me to do them as murals instead. I was like,
Sense.
okay. I was like, sure, this works for me.
Honey, okay.
Yeah, and then I saved the stencils, so can use them in my own house one day.
Fun.
I did lots of printmaking in college, so that was another thing that's definitely really influenced me. But yeah, so commissions have mostly come from word of mouth and friends, and making connections with people, like connections with students in my classes. Even like the big horse that I'm working on now that I'll show you guys in a bit was actually for a friend from elementary school. Go figure. Here's some of the horse that I'm working on right now. So as far as like the business side and advertising, I don't care to put a lot of excess energy into that. I find it super draining. So I have sort of found ways to do it in the least draining way possible, and to just sort of work it into what I'm already doing instead of forming things around posting and whatnot. But I don't put money into advertising, and I put as little time and energy as possible into it. But my main goal is to be as authentic as possible, because that has gotten me much further than when I've put time and money into it, and just been like, oh, click on this link for this thing. Like there was a time when I tried to be really like markety about it, and it felt fake and it didn't get me anywhere.
Yeah, I totally agree. Authenticity, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Couldn't get the word out.
Yeah, it gets you way further, and it's way less draining. And I also feel like whatever you do to get successful, you then have to keep doing. It's not like you get to some level where you then get to stop. So if you get successful by posting videos every single day, but it's exhausting, well, like there's not a point where you get to stop doing that. You have to keep doing it. So if I'm going to be successful, I need to get there in a way that is sustainable and true to myself, or it's just going to be taken away in one way or another. And also, so like the job with Cabrillo, I got because the administrator followed me online and saw my posts and saw what I was writing. And I was writing a lot of like very genuine things. And that's what like got her attention and got me that job. So I just see it pay off in a million ways. So these are some processes of this horse that I'm going to show you guys today. Oh, it's not letting me. I am logged in. Why won't it? You're not going to let me look at my own, or my own Instagram. But I do have Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. I have all the things, but one thing that I do, there we go. One thing that I do is like, if I make a TikTok, you can see right here, these are TikToks. I'm going to post it everywhere. So I make one thing and I post it everywhere. And I only do that when it's like genuinely feels like a good time. So like if I'm making a video,
follow their algorithm, post it at 5 o'clock. Whatever.
Too much work. And then it's like not fun. And I'm like doing this for fun.
And you get responses from it, obviously.
Yeah. And a lot of what I've gotten are opportunities as well. So I've done a lot of collaborations. Like I'll hold this up to my face screen if anyone's looking at that. This is a collaboration I did with a local artist during the pandemic. I know there's like a glare on it. But anyways, trying to get it in there. But anyway, so I've done a few collaborations and that's been really fun. I feel like in the pandemic that really ramped up. And that's been a fun way to just sort of connect with other artists and also find other opportunities. But yeah, that's all been from online. Okay. So yeah, this horse though, I started out with just the drawing, obviously, and then what my process has sort of become, and again, each one is a little bit different. But my process has sort of been to start with white usually, and I sort of lay down the texture. So with this horse, I was laying down the texture of the fur and getting that directionality. So then with each consecutive layer, it's like building upon that texture. So then it's just texture on texture on texture. And the way that I work is I do layers of color. So I did like a white layer, and then with this piece, I actually did an underpainting of purples and oranges. And so then when I take videos like this, it's just like a couple I just videotape a couple seconds every 30 minutes or so. Like whenever I think of it, I just pick up my phone, videotape like 2 brush strokes, and then put it back down. And at the end of the night, I put them all together and it makes a video, and it takes like 5 minutes of my time. So that's been my formula lately for dealing with that. But you can kind of see here.
This is super glazy.
Yes. Yeah, it's tons of glazes. So that's usually what I do is I'm working in a lot of like really translucent layers. And to be totally honest, a lot of that comes from insecurity around color mixing. I've realized. I didn't really even realize that I had like based a lot of my practice around the things I don't want to do, and one of which is color mixing. Because again, painting is a place for me to have fun. So if it's annoying, it's not fun anymore.
Obviously, it works for you. You have beautiful depth in your paintings that comes through that glazing.
Thank you. Yeah, it's really fun because I feel like it brings out colors in areas that I wouldn't even think to put there. It's one of the things I do with watercolor too. I really like to work wet on wet and let the colors mix, because I find that they naturally make colors that I never would have manually thought of and put there. This was another piece I finished recently with my Peacock. This was the 6th piece in a series I've been doing over the past, I guess it's almost 4 years now.
How long did that take?
About 6 months.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a long time. So yeah, this series has been super rewarding, and my spirituality has been a huge source of this change. Again, this is the type of stuff I used to do, these like little abstract pieces where it's like pour art. I was doing pour art with Mod Podge and like translucent mediums before it became like a big thing. And then I saw other people doing it and I was like, oh, I don't want to do it anymore. So so things changed, and but I do a lot of watercolor. I find that I've realized what I need to do is I need to work in 2 different veins at the same time, kind of. So at any given time, I usually have a realism piece going and either a side piece, or I just regularly go to my watercolor sketchbook and do watercolors. I need to have that structure and then that lack of structure and kind of play off the 2. I notice when I go too long working in one mode, then I just get really sort of overstimulated by it or something.
I agree. And tell you work in your sketchbook. How important do you think a sketchbook is for an artist?
I love sketchbooks and I've always loved them. But the way that I work with them has definitely morphed over the years. Like I have my high school sketchbooks and they were like my journals, they're like my little babies, just like full of my energy. But now my sketchbooks are more like, they're mostly just for my watercolors, to be honest. I have like a drawing sketchbook where I sketch out my pieces, and that I work in that like 2 or 3 times a year, just when I'm planning a new big piece. But then my watercolor sketchbook, I'm working in like multiple times a week, usually when I'm not packing for a move. And I don't take notes in them anymore. Like I used to write in them a lot. Now I don't write in them. They're just for, excuse me, like painting mandalas and things.
Right.
So I do think they're very important, but the way that they're important for me personally has changed over the years.
And do you work with photographs and when you're deciding on like the Peacock, or to get the details and everything?
Yes. So most of my pieces, I have worked with references, these larger animal pieces that I've been doing, because I want to be able to see that like really fine detail that I wouldn't otherwise think of. But I did do my piece right before this peacock. I did purely out of my mind, mostly just because I wanted to prove to myself that I could. Um, and I think there was like significance in that for that piece also. But kind of what happens for me is I think I figure out what animal needs to be the focus of my next piece. Like that's the first information that comes to me is like what animal is going to be the focus. And then I start looking for reference photos. And usually what has happened is whenever I find the photo, it's like, yes, I'm the photo. And then that's the one that I work from. And then things develop from there. And I kind of feel my way through the piece and figure out if there's going to be flowers and carving, whatever else is next. This was a collaboration I did from a Facebook group. There's this group on Facebook. If anyone, I think you have to be invited to be in it, but it's called Breakaway from the Everyday. If anyone wants to be invited, just message me in some way and I'll invite you on Facebook. It's a fantastic artist group. I have yet to find any other artist group that is super active, super encouraging, full of really talented artists. It's really, really great and it's taken off a lot. So if anyone's interested in joining that group, let me know. But I met this artist that I collaborated with through this Facebook group. She just messaged me and was like, hey, I like your art. Want to collaborate? And then she put on this show where she made one of these with like 10 or 12 other artists. So she's got like 10 or 12 of these. And she's had them in multiple shows now. And if they sell, I get like $1,000 or something, which would be great. So it's been really cool to kind of connect with other artists via the internet. I feel like that really ramped up in 2020. And then some of my classes, I have gone more into the spiritual side of things. My spirituality definitely has changed my art a ton, like 1,000,000%. That's one of the main things that has shifted since having my daughter. And yeah, it just like really clarified everything. Let's see what else I want to. Oh, and there's, I get my photos taken at Bay Photo. They have like a specific room if anyone's local and needs photos taken, Bay Photo. And then their prints are really high end.
Do you have, what are they called? G-clays done?
I have yet to go into G clays. I've mostly done acrylic prints and metal prints and wood prints, and I have loved all of those.
Metal prints, that's cool.
Yeah, the metal ones are really cool.
What is the name of the
Bay Photo.
A photo?
Yeah. And I found some people, I don't know, I've talked to some people who like weren't that happy with them, but I've been using them for the 5 years I've been here and I really have not had one single issue with them. I did once, but that was my fault. So I'll take credit for that.
Nobody's perfect.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, so yeah, I thought I'd save this in the other one, but yeah, the house portraits have really kind of developed. So when I first started taking commissions, I kind of like prided myself on doing any style and any medium. And I think having like a wide variety was really good and did get me a lot of commissions. But I think I've gotten more since I have narrowed down my style. But I have mixed feelings about that, about narrowing down style. I feel like it can be really helpful, but it can also be really limiting. This is an example of like my past abstract work and then my current more realistic work.
Do you think the more realistic work is more people have more interest in nowadays?
Yes, I definitely get 1,000,000 times more interest in the realistic work, which obviously I appreciate, but I still love the abstract work. So it's just one of those things where like, I would get a lot of comments that people thought my work was really interesting, but then I would never get sales because people don't seem to want abstract work in their house. But it's a bummer. And I just really like, I spent a lot of time when I was doing this abstract work, I was also trying to make art that would sell. So I was trying to make, I was like looking on Pinterest and copying things, but like trying to put my own spin on it. Like I was basically just working really disingenuously and disingenuinely. And I don't think that that got me very far. I think it, if anything, like stunted my growth. So similar to what we were talking about before we started, how, you know, when you teach, you really encourage people to follow their own style. Had to kind of like learn that through my own trial and error. This is a bit of a collaboration with that same artist from earlier. She did the woodcut and then I painted it. So collaborations have been a really great source of connection for me. And then more house portraits. I feel like once you kind of get into a vein of things, it does really help. But I never want, I don't know, it's so hard because it's one of those things you can't force and you can't teach, you know, you kind of have to find your own way. I was thinking I would go ahead and show some more of this horse, and then I'll switch to my phone and show the actual horse and show some of the brushes I use. Or if people have questions, feel free to ask questions.
And this is on wood also, right?
Yes. Yes.
And
And
this is dark background on that one.
Yeah. So it is on wood, but she didn't want any of the wood showing. She wanted it to look like traditional horse photography, which I guess is on all black. I mean, probably most people have seen those portraits.
The velvet paintings? No, sorry.
So yeah, I'll show you some of the, I'm going to show you like the close up in person as well, some of the techniques that I use for these and some of the brushes. Because again, I'm using pretty cheap materials still. And then on the side, I'm working on a collage because you always have to be doing multiple things. But here's some pictures of, so the underpainting was purple for the shadows, and then I did oranges for the highlights. So all of this was then orange and over here, but the purple, I guess, where did all my other pictures go? I didn't save any of them. Organization is really hard. Picture organization is really hard. So I don't know where all my in-between pictures are, but that was the underpainting. I counted yesterday and I really only used like 6 colors for this painting.
Really?
Yeah.
And you started light and worked to dark.
Yes. Yeah.
Like
so I started with
watercolor.
Yeah. So I started with just the drawing and then started with the white to get that kind of texture, to get the texture going. Most of my animal paintings have started that way, where I've gotten that underlayer of texture, and then with the consecutive layers, I can adjust the texture if and when I need to.
You then add, can we see like a close-up of the your feathers?
Yes. Let's see. Maybe if I do this and just kind of zoom in. These feathers were different than
Wow.
These were different than the swan painting I have. I'll pull that up next because these ones I had to it was like one long brush stroke for each of these feathers. And then a lot of them I did multiple layers because they go from like a light teal to a dark teal. Whereas with my swan and other feathers I've done, it was more like taking a fan brush and just doing like some light back and forth feathers. But with the peacock, it was like you had to take one fine brush and do one long line for every single feather.
Because they're very specific. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't really think of that when I started. And then I started and I was like, oh my God, what have I done to myself? This is gonna take me forever. And it did take me forever. Okay, I just gotta find and then I made a model. So this is a close-up of that tiger. I was taking pictures of the imperfections. So this is a crack in the wood, and that happens when you paint on wood.
After you started?
Yeah, this is, I was revarnishing because I wanted to go through and dust everything and revarnish for Open Studios. So I took this picture. You can see the varnish is wet right here. But I was taking pictures of the imperfections because I was also trying to figure out how to price these. I don't know how to price any of my work. It's very hard. But I was taking pictures of the imperfections just in case I felt like that would have an implication on the price at all. Like some of the edges are not great. That's for the lion piece, which I don't know where the large picture is. Okay, let me find the swan. I just want to see if I can find some up close. Oh, here's so this dog, for instance, there's like a nice progression of the colors. I've been trying to branch out with my colors because I've realized that I'm a little insecure about my color usage. So I'm trying to remedy that. So I'm trying to kind of do something a little different. But so I start very like big general shapes and then work my way into the details. So this kind of shows you that progression. This is a wolf piece I did. Yeah, I was looking for that swan to show the feathers. If I don't find it in a minute, I'll just move on. This piece has a lot of feathers in it, but they are all black. But this piece took me a year.
Wow.
Trying to get a good picture. This was the piece that I did out of my head with no references. And then these are all pressed flowers, and all of this white is carved
Into the wood.
Yeah. So mixing that like kind of relief and carving technique, I feel like has been really interesting. And with this series, the light has sort of taken over and become its own character, which has also been really cool. I've realized with this, like since I started working on these animals, I've had this sensation. This is going to sound, like woo-woo or whatever, but I'm very woo-woo. I've really felt like the paintings are really coming through me instead of me being the creator. I've really felt like I'm having more of a channeling experience, and it's changed my art so much. So that's why I started teaching more spiritually focused things, and I like talk about these things a lot more because it's done a total like 180 for my work. And I see it in other people too, like when they tap into, there's like a certain internal space that when you really tap into like that really authentic place, the art that comes out has a magic to it that just isn't there when you're trying to mimic something or you have like a really specific end result in mind. I just feel like I've seen that not just for myself, but for other people.
Yeah. I think that you hear that with singers and other types of artists too, that tapping into that authentic place is super important.
Yeah, it really is. And you can tell when someone's done it and when they haven't quite. And that's not a judgment at all. It's not something that can be forced.
It's not an easy thing to find.
Exactly. Yeah. Like it kicked in for me again once I had my daughter. I don't think this could have been possible until I had that experience. So this is the swan that I did. And so these are obviously much different feathers.
And those are pressed flowers.
Yeah. Let's see. This is
How big is the swan?
This one's 3 by 4 feet. So is the horse. Yeah. Yeah, I started with very small turtles and things, and then everything got really big really fast. I was like, I don't have room for any of this, but we're gonna do it anyways. So yeah. Oh, here's a view. You can kind of see the carvings a little bit better.
Do you leave that raw wood or do you sometimes fill it in?
I've mostly left it, but I do have, I haven't posted that in forever, so I probably won't be able to find it, but I do have this piece I did of dolphins, and in the carved wood, I actually stained it like a dark brown, so it looks like it's wood burning instead of wood carving.
Cool.
Kind of cool. And then this was a big commission I did for somebody. This is when it was unfinished. It looked better in the end. But someone was moving and they wanted a piece commemorating their garden. But that too, it's someone who I met her because our kids were babies at the same time and we were in the same nursing group. Like so many of my either opportunities or straight up commissions have come through connections. I think there's only been like 2, maybe 3 times where I've had a complete stranger come out of nowhere and ask for a commission. That just has very rarely happened.
Put yourself out there to get seen.
Yeah. And like foster connections. I mean, like just being a nice person gets you really far. Not that I'm like so wonderful. I definitely have my issues, but I can say that because I struggled as a teen and stuff, and I wasn't always the nicest person. And I realized as I worked on myself, my work got better and I got more commissions, and just like everything got nicer when I got nicer. So you learn through trial and error. Okay, so if anyone has any questions, I could answer some more questions, but I thought I would switch to the phone camera so I can show you some other stuff.
All right.
That sound good? Okay.
Yeah.
I'll stop sharing.
If
Okay.
anybody wants to chime in, you're welcome to, or you can in the chat. If you don't want to say anything, I'll say it for you. There's also this, I think the way that you do more than one thing at a time is interesting, that especially on a big piece. Do you think that that helps you loosen up or tighten up or find a different energy when you're flipping back and forth between these long paintings that you take months to do?
Yeah, it's definitely a lot of times I think of, especially the watercolors, I almost think of like a sorbet after a meal or something. where
Nice.
cleanser. So yeah, but then also like, if I had never tried to press flowers, I would have never made these paintings with the pressed flowers. I didn't know that these pressed flowers would eventually be in my big paintings. I was just doing them because I finally learned how to keep flowers alive, and I couldn't possibly throw them away because I worked really hard to keep those flowers alive. And then I was like, what do I do with them? So I started, like, it just developed into something else. So by doing these side projects, and I've seen that elsewhere, like my collage stuff, I do collages on the side, and sometimes they work into my bigger pieces. So I think things kind of all come together when they need to.
Okay, I'm going to change the focus to your phone then, or
Okay.
pin. Well, no, not pin it. I need to.
My lighting is in here.
Spotlight. There you go.
Like
There
I
you go.
explained, my camera that I usually connect to my computer broke the other day, so I had to use my let me- all right, I'm not going to join with audio on here because it might mess it up, but if you can't hear me, let me know.
No, we can hear you fine.
Okay, great. Okay, so I was just going to show some of the specifically the brushes that I've been using for this, because it's almost done. Again, I just have like a few like tweaks to make for the patron. I was about to say commissioner, no, patron. So I'm just going to
When
show.
you inadvertently said, is there anything you want me to change?
Yeah, really. Luckily, she's very nice. It was things like, oh, her ears were a little bit more black. It was like little things. It wasn't like anything too terrible. But yeah, that's always a gamble when you're like, give me notes.
Could you make her facing me?
Yeah, really. Can you just flip the whole thing? Okay, so with this piece, a lot of what I've been using is actually this old broken brush. So like I never throw away junk brushes. And what's funny is I used to do paintings with one brush, like that I showed you that big 6-foot painting that was kind of abstract. I did that with one small brush, the whole thing.
Find yourself using smaller brushes because of detail work?
Yeah, I've definitely I make myself use bigger brushes sometimes just so that I don't get so bogged down in the detail, because then I'll overwork and I'll ruin it. So that's definitely like one of those things that I've had to work on. But this like splayed out, this used to be a flat brush and now it's I don't know, like a floof or something.
I like the floof brush.
Yeah, this is a floof. That's a scientific name. And so when it's wet, it makes these really great like separated marks. So I use that a lot for these furs right here, especially these sort of longer like individual marks. This brush has made these really perfectly. And then when it's dry, it's a really nice soft like fluffer kind of brush. This is my pile of brushes I've been using. I just set them aside from yesterday, so definitely more than one. It's progress. My newest favorite brushes are makeup brushes. So
Really?
yeah, makeup brushes. I tried it one time and I was like, oh, I'm hooked for life. They are amazing, especially for any like dry brushing. Like all of this here is with makeup brushes. All of these little, like all of this like delicate softness was this makeup brush. Like it's just the perfect little kind of like I can water it down with the paint and make like very, very faint hints of things, or I can dry brush and like really blend it out.
Is it a softer hair brush or?
Yeah, they are. Well, actually, one of them is and one of them isn't. this one is a little bit more coarse and bigger, and then this one's a little softer and pointier. And then a lot of them I just stole from my daughter's like kids makeup. Like this is it's silly and pink. It's like a kid's makeup brush. But this
They're
one,
not expensive ones.
no, they're not even expensive ones, but they're so nice. Like the hairs don't fall off. The hairs aren't getting, I've used this for so long and the hairs aren't even like splayed.
Good to know.
Yeah, genius. Go to like Claire's and just get a ton of little kids makeup brushes. They're fantastic. And then for obviously like for the bigger areas, I'm using these wider brushes. But since I work a lot in glazes, I'm also using this like to get all of this darker, I'm using a bigger brush to just do a ton of glazes.
Are you glazing over the detail also? I mean, this like at this stage?
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely lots of glazing with the detail because I kind of like go back and forth between the shadows and the highlights, and because kind of like with each layer I do, I use my eye to sort of like scan for one thing. So I'm like, okay, right now I'm scanning for the black, and then I just put black in my little container and I'm just doing black. So something about the way my brain works, like I've seen other people who do hyper realism painting and they'll like go to the eye and they'll do this one area of the eye for an hour and then get it to completion and they don't touch it again. That's not what I do. I'm like working on the whole piece every time, but in like very specific layers where again, I'm scanning for the shadows or the highlights or this color or that texture or whatever it is.
So you mix up a bucket or a cup of color that you are using throughout your whole painting instead of a palette full of color.
Yeah. Yeah, and then I like to work, I use these little, this is my daughter's, so I just have a pink one here,
Oh,
but
that's classic.
yeah, I know, again, I'm like the cheap worker, but the thing is like, I like these because since I water the paint down, it holds a little puddle of watered down paint. So I'll have like the pile of black right here and then a puddle of black like within it. So then I have opaque paint and watered down paint. And I do that with my watercolors as well. That's the way I set up every palette, no matter what it is. So
Genius. Oh my God, these are such great ideas.
thanks.
That's just gorgeous. It looks like a photo.
Oh, great. That's good. So yeah, let's see. I don't know. I'll look at my notes and see if I have anything else that I had in mind to tell you guys. Again, I was gonna do a demo, but I didn't know I would be this far done with this horse. And I just can't really, I was trying to like, I can't really like hold the camera and paint and talk at the same time.
Understand.
I don't
And
want
when
to.
you're you were saying you don't know what to charge for your paintings. So do you look at other artists that do similar work, or are you just sort of doing it by the time that you spend?
So with smaller pieces and with commissions, I have a bit of a process, just through trial and error, because those are things I have been selling for a long period of time. But when it comes to these like big animal pieces I've done, I think I mentioned I've done a series of 6. I'm thinking it'll be 7, but I'm about to move, so I don't know what's gonna happen. But I've done 6 of these big animal pieces over the past like 3 years. The smallest one is 30 by 30, so they're all really large. I don't know what to price those at all. So at this point, I'm pricing them based on what I would want for that amount of time. So like the one that took a year, I'm like, I don't know, in a perfect world, I'd make 40 grand in a year. So let's say if it's 40 grand, like, I don't know. But I can also like I can get a wood print of any of these pieces made to scale for so much less. So like if I'm going to sell the original, I say, why not ask for 20, 30, 40 grand? If I sell it one day, great. If not, they can get a print that same size for 1 grand if that's what they want. So
Genius. Are you going to have a show with these, or is that a goal? You don't know.
I don't know. I'm not very good at goals. I like to just let it come.
Very zen of you. Very zen of you.
Yeah. Plus, I really hate when I make plans and they get changed. So it's a way of avoiding a lot of frustration.
I hear you, sister.
What's really crazy is I had actually thought that the 7th piece of that series, I had planned to do a horse. And then I got this horse commission for a giant ass horse. I don't get large. This is the largest commission I've had. Well, okay, I know I had a couple big ones during COVID actually. So I guess it's not, but it's the largest realism piece I've done. One of the more expensive commissions I've had. So anyways, when I got that commission, I was like, well, I'm clearly not going to paint one realistic giant horse and then do another one. So I felt like the universe is telling me I'm not doing a horse next. So I'm like, I don't know.
Do you keep the rights to prints for this, or do you? Yeah.
Yeah, I have a whole commissions contract that I have people sign, and then I take 50% up front, get the other 50% when it's done. And yeah, I make prints of everything and I sell whatever prints I can whenever I can. I have a website on my store. I used to have an Etsy shop and then they burned me and I never want to work with them again. I like being in control of my own situation. So
Yeah,
yeah.
it's interesting with this internet, the way things are kind of going art-wise. And I think that a lot of us, we're probably older generation than you are for the most part, but it's a different animal than, say, galleries and all of the above that. But it really is how people are connecting and selling and teaching in the art world.
Yeah. It's definitely interesting. I think there's pros and cons to it for sure. Like there's plenty of cons. Things are so easily stolen and whatnot, but there's also so much opportunity to get your art out there and to like get the money in your pocket. Because when you work with a gallery, you get what, like 30-40%. Like they take so like it is a whole new world. And I think there's potential for a lot of good and a lot of not so good. So
yeah. Do you have, when you get your money over selling something over the internet or something, do you have a surefire way that works best? I mean, now they pay you like PayPal or
yeah.
which one do you think works best?
On my website, I believe they have the opportunity to pay through PayPal or Square.
Right.
But I think it's all funneled to me through Square because I don't sell a ton on my website, but when I do, it's always like a Square update, I think. But I'm pretty sure, but like people can pay either way.
Is that Weebly?
I used to have Weebly, but now I use GoDaddy.
And they do the Square too?
Yeah, I have found them really user friendly. And when I need help, I have found them mostly helpful. I had one situation where they were not helpful and I was real mad, but most of the time they've been very helpful.
And do you find that that internet server is easy to upload your more so than the other one?
Yeah, I think it is. Any online shop I find is tricky to like. I have a hard time with the setup of shops, especially like with prints. There is such a huge variety of prints that you can get made that to like make it user friendly to put it on your website and offer like the correct amount of choices and stuff. I find that to be really hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I have like my set things, but then there's always a note of like, I can get this printed in different sizes and different types. So contact me with questions.
Gotcha. And is that at jess.pidcock@AOL or is that your email?
That's my email. The website is jessicapidcock.com. I can put that in the chat if that's helpful.
Yes.
I'm also on, like I mentioned, I'm on the social medias if anyone wants to like chat on there or anything. I have found that stuff helpful for various reasons. But again, it's one of those things where I feel like if you don't let it drain you, it's helpful, but it can be draining if you kind of like buy into all of it.
I have a Facebook page and it posts on Instagram and the page at the same time. So that's kind of an easy thing, but I don't know about the TikTok or the other ones.
Yeah, I felt like, yeah, I started on TikTok just watching because it was fun. And then I was like, oh, people are getting noticed on here and videos are the wave of the future. So I guess I'll jump on board.
Gotcha. All right. Well, I thank you so much for all this great information. I mean, it's like I could talk to you for hours on all this. Wait, I have more questions. I hope that our group got anything that what they needed, and I'm really appreciate you doing this for us, Jessica. It was fun.
Oh, thanks so much for having me.
I think you did a really great job. Bravo.
Oh, nice. If anyone wants to reach out, let me know. I like talking about art. So
Excellent. Well, I'll be talking to you, baby. I'm going to stop the recording for our YouTube channel. There you go.